have given this lecture 31 times. I will give it once more, and then I will retire the file and let someone younger carry it forward. Someone who still believes the data might change the outcome. I no longer believe that. I give it because the record requires it, and because there is a species on the far side of the Vethrin corridor that has been watching our instruments for 6 years, and has begun, according to the transit monitoring body, to commission a crossing attempt. They will not attend this lecture. I give it anyway. The subject is thermal measurement at the boundary of human space, not the boundary itself, not what the boundary signifies, or what the old designations in the transit authority's ledger say about it, or what the elder species congregations have preserved in their warning texts across 11,000 years of institutional memory. Those sources exist, and I will not quarrel with them. My subject is narrower. My subject is what instruments record when they are placed within measurement range of the boundary, and what those instruments do not record, and what the difference between those two things means. I came to this work from thermal dynamics. I spent the first 30 years of my career studying heat as a systemic property, how it distributes, how it transfers, how it persists or dissipates across boundaries of every kind. I was not interested in human space. I was interested in the mathematics of thermal equilibrium in sector-wide stellar environments, and the boundary at human space appeared in my calculations only as a convenient region of comparative data, a sector with low stellar density, and an unusual ambient temperature gradient. I treated it as a footnote. I treated the transit authority's designation as an administrative artifact. I was not unintelligent. I was not incurious. I simply had not yet been given the instrument readings. The readings came to me through a colleague at the Solvarith Measurement Cooperative, who had inherited them from a senior surveyor, who had inherited them from the expedition that produced them, and who had spent the intervening years trying to find a thermal physicist willing to review them without dismissing them as equipment malfunction. 3 colleagues had dismissed them before me. I reviewed them because my colleague asked as a personal favor, and because I had an open afternoon, and because I did not expect to find anything that would cost me the next 2 decades of my working life. The expedition was a standard deep boundary survey, launched by the cooperative 47 years ago under a transit authority waiver as part of a broad sector mapping initiative. 9 instrument packages, each the size of a small transport, each carrying redundant thermal sensors, radiation detectors, gravimetric arrays, and electromagnetic spectrum analyzers across 17 frequency bands. The packages were deployed at graduated distances from the boundary, the outermost at 11 light hours, the innermost at 4. The purpose was to characterize the ambient thermal profile of the boundary region. The expectation was a gradient consistent with the sector's stellar density, perhaps with minor anomalies attributable to the unusual absence of navigational activity in the zone. 7 of the 9 packages returned complete data sets. The 2 innermost did not return. Their final transmissions arrived in sequence, 119 seconds apart. I will describe what those transmissions contained. The outer of the 2 final packages recorded a standard ambient profile for 83 days. On the 84th day, its sensors registered a thermal event at the boundary, not a weapons discharge, not an energy pulse consistent with any propulsion signature in the cooperative's reference library, not an electromagnetic burst, not a gravimetric anomaly, not a radiation spike. What the sensors registered was a cessation, across all 17 frequency bands simultaneously, in the direction of the boundary. Thermal activity stopped, not diminished, not attenuated by distance or material interference. Stopped. The package's own sensors continued to function. The package itself continued to radiate normally, but in the direction it was facing, in the region it was measuring, the thermal signature of the boundary zone went from ambient to absolute in a single sampling interval of 1.4 seconds. The package transmitted this reading and then went silent. Its final confirmed position was 9 light hours from the boundary. The silence was not consistent with instrument failure. Instrument failure produces noise, a cascade of corrupted readings, a degradation curve, a final partial transmission. This package transmitted 1 clean reading and then produced nothing. Not corrupted nothing. Nothing. The inner package, 4 light hours closer, had already ceased transmitting by the time the outer package's final reading arrived at the cooperative's relay station. Its last transmission predated the outer package's cessation event by 119 seconds. It did not transmit a thermal anomaly. It transmitted a standard ambient reading, and then it transmitted nothing. The standard ambient reading was unremarkable. The cessation was unremarkable in the same way. Clean, complete, without degradation, without noise. I spent 11 years with these 2 datasets. I consulted colleagues in 7 disciplines. I submitted the readings to 3 independent instrument certification bodies to confirm the packages had been functioning within specification at the time of their final transmissions. They had been. I modeled every known physical mechanism that could produce a thermal cessation of the kind the outer package recorded. There are two that produce a cessation rather than a diminishment: the complete removal of all matter from a region, and the reduction of all matter in a region to a temperature of absolute zero. The first requires energy expenditure on a scale that would have registered across every other instrument in the array. It did not register. The second requires the same. Neither mechanism registered. I want to be precise here, because precision is what the data demands and what I owe to anyone who receives it. The instruments did not detect a weapon. The instruments did not detect a propulsion system, an energy source, a mechanical process, or any phenomenon consistent with any classification in any reference library I have been able to consult, including the restricted access archives of the elder species congregations, whose oldest thermal records predate our cooperative by a margin I am not authorized to specify but that I will say is not trivial. The instruments detected a cessation. They detected it cleanly, once, and they did not detect anything after it. And the cessation was not in the instruments. The instruments were working. The cessation was in the thing they were measuring. I retired from the Solvarith Measurement Cooperative 8 years ago. I joined this academy because a department head I respect asked me to teach thermal dynamics to the cohort that would go on to staff the sector survey institutions. I agreed. I added this lecture to the curriculum because I could not find a principled reason to withhold the data from people who might one day find themselves designing measurement packages for border survey missions, and who should know, before they finalize their specifications, what happened to the last 2 packages that crossed the 11 light-hour threshold. The species on the far side of the Vethran corridor has been watching our instruments for 6 years. I know this because the transit monitoring body publishes its observation logs and I read them. I know they are commissioning a crossing attempt because a source I will not name told me, and because the transit monitoring body's logs show a pattern of observation consistent with route planning rather than scientific curiosity. They are not interested in our data. They have not contacted any measurement institution to request the survey records. They are interested in the route. I have submitted a copy of the survey data to the Transit Authority's Border Advisory Office. The Advisory Office acknowledged receipt. I do not know what they will do with it. I have given this lecture 31 times, twice. Members of cohorts I have taught went on to staff institutions that advised against crossing attempts using, in part, arguments that derived from this data. In both cases, the crossing attempts were eventually made by different species, under different administrations, and the results were consistent with the historical pattern that the elder species congregations have been preserving for 11,000 years. I take no satisfaction in consistency. I want to close with a statement that is not a warning, because warnings require a belief that they will be heeded, and I have been in this work long enough to be honest about that. I want to close with a fact. The boundary does not register as cold on instruments placed at 11 light hours. At 11 light hours it registers as ambient. The cessation begins at some point between 11 light hours and 4. We do not know where, because the package that might have told us did not transmit a cessation reading. It transmitted an ambient reading and then stopped. At some point between those 2 positions, whatever the boundary does, it does it faster than 1.4 seconds. The outer package had 1.4 seconds to register the event and transmit. The inner package had less than that. We know it had less because it did not use it. That is not a weapon system I recognize. That is not a defense I have a framework for. That is a region of space where something can reduce thermal activity to absolute across every known frequency band in a time shorter than the transmission interval of a functioning instrument, and where the instrument does not transmit afterward, and where the only reading that came back clean is the one that was taken from far enough away to survive the taking of it. I have filed the data. I have given the lecture. The archive is open to any institution that requests it. The species on the far side of the Vethran corridor has not requested it. I do not expect them to.